from the City of Presidents. It's the All About QuinZEE podcast. This is your host, John Melley. Join me as we explore the history, hidden gems, and highlight the businesses with great stories that all tell the tale why QuinZEE, Massachusetts is a great place to live. Hey there, it's John. How are you? Thanks for spending some time with me today. I do appreciate it. We have a very special episode of the All About QuinZEE podcast today. My guest is QuinZEE native and author Patrick Grimes. You may recall a couple of episodes back, I interviewed Patrick about his book that he had written called Growing Up QuinZEE, QuinZEE, a play on the pronunciation of our fair city. And he was visiting QuinZEE earlier this summer and gave a book tour as part of his book launch to great success and rave reviews. I'll tell you a little bit more about how this episode evolved during my conversation with Patrick, but we're going to be showcasing some of the various odd and sundry stories in his book, and Patrick is going to perform them for us. This episode is sponsored by Patrick and Growing Up QuinZEE. You can purchase Growing Up QuinZEE, written by Patrick Grimes, on Amazon.com. Again, Patrick spells his last name Grimes, Patrick Grimes, and the book is Growing Up QuinZEE, QuinZEE. And you can find that on Amazon. If you're so inclined after hearing this great story we're going to share with you today, go and buy a copy of this book. There are about 90 different stories. It's 500 plus pages long. It's great. If you grew up in the city of QuinZEE, this is going to bring back a lot of memories for you. And that really is what Patrick wants to accomplish by writing and sharing these stories with you. So without further delay, let's go listen to my conversation with Patrick. Hey, welcome back. As I said, my guest today, returning by popular demand, is Patrick Grimes. He is the author of Growing Up QuinZEE, QuinZEE. Patrick and I have gotten to know each other over this summer. He came back to his beloved hometown of QuinZEE, Massachusetts, QuinZEE, Massachusetts, after writing a book, Growing Up QuinZEE. And we had Patrick on as a guest. And then you came to town and did a book tour to rave reviews. Patrick, you and I had a couple of conversations when we met, when you were in town, talking about the possibilities of putting the Growing Up QuinZEE book into an audio book. And we started talking about possibly doing an audio book for Amazon. And then we kind of brainstormed a little bit and came up with the idea of let's do some of these stories for the podcast. And you liked the idea, I liked the idea, and boom, here we are.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. People back in QuinZEE have really resonated with a lot of the stories, and it brings back a lot of memories for them. And for that, I'm really grateful and happy. And many people have asked me if I could say these stories orally, which hopefully I can do, and that they would love to hear them. So you and I figured, let's give it a shot.
Right. And the thing is that I saw your talk at QuinZEE Public Library, and you read one of the stories there. What was it? Gotta Go? Or the
Mike the Winger.
Mike the Winger, yes. And I got to say, you looked like you were having an absolute ball during your presentation. And I know you did several around town. And then you read Mike the Winger, and I thought, this guy, you know these stories intimately, but you read it with such fun, and you did character voices and all that kind of stuff. I said, this guy can tell a story. You obviously can write them, but we talked about this, and you reached out to some groups on Facebook, I think, and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this. What stories would you like to hear? What were some of the responses you got, Patrick?
I thought they were interesting. There was some people that wanted to hear the story about the Yard, which is Y-A-D if you're from the Boston QuinZEE area, or Y-A-R-D if you're not from there. And that was the shipyard. And the shipyard was a staple of QuinZEE back when I was growing up, particularly in the 60s and 70s, and actually before and after that.
Yep.
And so that was a very popular one. The one we're going to do today is called The Jar on the Bar, and it's about an institution, if you will, in Quincy, Massachusetts, a restaurant called Alfredo's.
Right.
And Alfredo's is beloved. It's no longer there. I think it's called, you may remember, the Chinese. So
It's
what is
it's
it?
the Fusion Kitchen.
The Fusion Kitchen.
Yep.
And actually, it's a great restaurant, the Fusion Kitchen. I had one of my tour stops there, and I thought it was really good. But yeah, the Jar and the Bar came up as a very popular one. And then there were some others. I know you, because you live by Bradford Street Playground, would like to hear or have read, and perhaps would like to hear the story of the Bradford Street Boys, which is about us back in the day playing basketball at the playground, doing many other things.
Shooting hoops and causing trouble.
Well, trying not to cause trouble, but a
There you
few of
go.
the
I know.
kids I hung out with might have been guilty of that. I wouldn't know, of course.
No, but when we talked about it, the story that jumped out the most to folks with the biggest demand was the Jar in the Bar, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
And yeah, just to quickly tell you a little bit about it without going too deeply into the story. I used to live in top of Alfredo's, and I would be down at the bar all the time, not drinking. I was young. I was drinking Coca-Cola and eating minestrone soup. But one day I noticed a jar on the bar, and there was a whole story that kind of went with that, and a lot of feelings that were embedded inside of me that has to do with that jar. And so basically, that was my motivation for writing.
Okay. Let's just introduce it. This is Patrick Grimes reading his story, Jar in the Bar, from his book, Growing Up QuinZEE.
Alfredo's restaurant was located on Franklin Street in Quincy, Massachusetts. Very popular, it was known for its excellent cuisine and service. For me, it was an extension of my home. For many years, we lived atop the restaurant in an apartment. Attached, and for me, the building's cornerstone was its bar, and my best memories resided there. Bill, the bartender, was the distributor of drinks, and more importantly, the conductor of all things bar-related. He orchestrated all goings-on during the day and served as a middleman for all matters with the outside world. When the phone behind the bar rang, a hush would come over all the occupants. Bill would pick up and say, well, hello, Mary, or whatever the name might be. He would pass a quick glance at the affected party, and the customer would quickly signal whether he was present or not to be found. Bill would answer appropriately, either telling the wife her husband had left or handing the phone over to him. I was the adopted resident, as everyone knew my father, who was a regular, and all knew we lived upstairs. As a kid, I was always welcomed and allowed free access. I even adopted my own special booth. Many a day I could be found there, eating minestrone soup with a basket full of sliced rolls nearby and a cold glass of Coca-Cola at the ready. The waitresses and I were on first-name basis, and I came to know many of those who entered the doors. I was Lenny Grimes' son, and soon became an accepted fixture. Eventually, I came to know all the regulars who became a part of my extended family. The bar and its inner workings fascinated me. It served as a regular after-work respite for many. A drink or two was the norm, and for some, merely a start. Many had their own special seats that they were quick to find and claim, but friends always found friends and surrounded each other. The conversations and atmosphere always seemed lively and congenial, and Bill was always there to lend an ear or to give advice. Every so often when I went in, I would notice a jar on the bar. Immediately I knew what that meant, but it wasn't always that way. I remember the first time I noticed a jar. I was perplexed as it sat like a stranger, alien to the familiar accoutrements usually found at the bar. I mounted my nearby booth and investigated. Taped to the jar's side was a name, an unfamiliar name. There were also assorted bills inside, ones, fives, few tens. Bill noticed my curiosity and told me it was for a regular patron of the bar, then said his name and that he had recently died. The money was for his family to be used as they saw fit. I sat back down and for the next couple of hours watched, fascinated by the people who came and left and their interactions with the jar. The jar was given an unspoken, quiet reverence, and nobody would take a seat directly in front of it. Some people would glance at it knowingly, and others would be immediately drawn to it in curiosity to see whose name was attached to it. It sparked conversations and sometimes funny and loud remembrances of past times shared with that person. Many drinks were purchased and toasts made to the man whose name decorated the side. Most of the patrons seemed to wait until the last moment when they were about to leave and then made a special trip over to it, dropping some money in as sort of a final daily tribute or recognition. Once, I watched a man come in and quietly walk over to the bar and then to the jar. He didn't say a word, but I could see the wet reflection in his eyes as he walked away and seated himself at the end of the bar, far away from where it sat. As he sipped his drink every so often, he would take a furtive glance back at the jar and then quickly return his attention and gaze back to his glass. Deep in my thoughts and imagination, I thought he must have been a close friend and was still working through his grief. Or rather, perhaps, he was a stranger to the man, and the jar had reawakened and affected his sensibilities to his own mortality. Either way, it was captivating. As I continued watching, I sensed a special kinship grow between those seated at the bar and the jar. To me, those seated seemed to quietly develop a special bond with it. It felt as if a palatable thought took form and permeated throughout, and I finally discerned what it was: an acceptance and acknowledgement that someday their own names would adorn that jar's side. After that day, I was always hesitant to look and inspect the bar to see if a jar had been set there. As the years passed, I saw too many familiar names, including one day, my father's. I truly believe we have all constructed our own Alfredo's bar in our lives, unique to us. We surround ourselves with our fraternity, filled with a cadre of friends and family who pull up their stools, man the booths, and share their lives. Laughter, joy, and friendship are our constant companions and perch comfortably beside us. We frolic together, tell our stories, and bartend our own. We serve each other. And somewhere on a shelf, buried among the unused glasses, sits an empty jar.
Wow. It's a very emotional story, Patrick. First of all, thank you for performing that story for us and the listeners of the show. As I was listening to your telling of the story, it occurred to me that you conjure great images with your words. And I couldn't help but thinking that, it's an interesting thing that you experienced this as a child, but you're seeing it through your eyes now as a grown man. And I can't help but think that your life experience and retelling of that story from a child's experience, but from a grown man's perspective, somehow colored, not in a bad way, but helped shape and provide, if you will, for the lack of a better word, the wisdom of time to help frame that story.
Absolutely. I think for me, we all have a little boy or a little girl inside of us. And I think we need to reconnect to that little girl or gal at different times. And when I read a story like this, and when I was writing a story like this, I reconnected. That's the only way I can write, is I go off by myself, and then I'm seeing this whole thing again from a child's perspective, the child that I was, but as you said, also as an older man who understands now what he was seeing.
Yes. What really hit me was when you described the man who came in and walked up to the jar, placed his donation in, and then went down to the other end of the bar, and you saw that he had been crying, and that he would quickly look at the jar and then back to his drink. And I could see that. You painted that picture so vividly. And it's just that we've all seen and experienced, if we haven't seen it among others, we've experienced it ourselves. And so I think when you tell the story, that we can, like you've said before, they're relatable. It was a powerful thing, especially when you got to the thing with your seeing your father's name on a jar. That must have been very powerful and emotional for you.
Yeah, I can remember that day. My dad actually had a massive heart attack sitting beside his best friend, Bill McDonald, at the bar at
Oh, gosh.
Alfredo's restaurant. And if you knew my dad and if you knew Bill McDonald, it was in its own way. We all have to pass a wonderful thing. And I know that sounds odd,
No,
but
I get it.
okay. Yeah. And he was with his best friend, and it was quick, and he laid his head down in the bar. And I suppose another reason why Alfredo's, and especially the bar, means so much to me.
Yeah. How could it not? My wife Ann and I, we had many a meal at Alfredo's. I always liked their stuffed pork chops, and she would get their Greek salad. Um,
Nice.
um, but yeah, I wonder what you thought when you found out that Alfredo's had changed ownerships and cuisine styles, etc.
I think, like most things in our lives, especially when I went back again to visit QuinZEE at the different times I have, things are going to change. And sometimes that's really hard for us to accept, but there's nothing we can do about it. And it's part of our lives. But yes, there was a sadness because of it's not only the establishment that dies, it's the memories attached to them. Though they haven't died, there's some part of them that seems missing when you
Right.
don't see that edifice.
Yeah, or the woodwork or the bar. The bar has changed,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
the booths have changed and the rug.
Oh, the booths, right? Yes,
Man, those booths.
absolutely.
Can you tell us how that story sparked for you? When did you go, oh my gosh, yeah, I remember that. I got to write a story about that.
Yeah, once I knew I probably was going to write a series of stories on growing up in Quincy, I sat down one day and I just thought, and I started making notes. Well, what are the things, what are the memories, what are the particularly poignant memories that kind of come on? And there were many of them, but each memory is really an embedded story. And when I wrote down just a short thing like, oh, the bar and the jar, I already knew the story. It was just a matter of connecting to it. I didn't have to write down anything else. I just had to write down the bar and the jar, and I was back there again.
Right.
And just like when I wrote the story, The Wall, about the wall on what I'll still call Wollaston Boulevard, though it's Quincy Shore Drive. I will always call it Wollaston Boulevard. The wall, I just have to put the wall, and so many memories are there that I think my memories dictate my writing. My hand's just the instrument of my memories, whatever my memories are telling me.
That makes perfect sense. You ever wonder sometimes maybe I think you and I had this conversation when we were talking about doing the audiobook, what it is about a certain memory that makes you remember something, because there's so much of our lives that just kind of go by that you don't even think about. It's like, what did you have for dinner last Tuesday? Unless it was a really memorable meal, it's just whatever. But there's something that happens when you're a 7-year old. It could be something that was mundane, but for some reason you just get this, you glimpse it in your mind's eye and you go, oh yeah, I remember that. What is it about events that make them memorable versus things that just, kind of just don't pay much attention to. I've always been fascinated by that.
I have too. And I think what it is your mind, your consciousness, it recognizes it before we do. And so it embeds us for it. For instance, one day I was, and I wrote a short story about this. I was driving to work and it was an early morning and I was driving down what I'll call Wollaston Boulevard and the song My Girl started playing. And my top was down on my car and I just started singing. It was a beautiful day. I could smell the sea. It was a beautiful summer morning. Little did I know that that moment was embedded within me. And at 74 years old, I can remember it vividly. So I think it's our consciousness just says, this is important. I'm going to put it away. I'm going to put it in a safe somewhere. I'm going to store it at some time in the future. You'll understand it. You'll know why I did it. And it's going to be there for your use.
That's
It's
very
going to be
insightful.
in an unwrapped box, is what I like to say, for us to open.
I like it. I don't know what more we could add to that story at this point, Patrick. I want to thank you for, first of all, it took a lot of guts for you to write these stories and publish them and share them with people. I know why you wrote them. You wrote them to stimulate memories and have people reconnect with their childhoods and with each other and the fellowship that comes along with being friends and growing up in this city. But still, it took a lot of guts for you to basically share your life and your life's experiences and put it out there for everybody to read and listen to. And so I just want to acknowledge that you did that. And secondly, thank you for doing that and spending the time with us today. First of all, I'll let you comment on that. And then I want to ask a question of our listeners.
I appreciate it. It's funny when you say it takes guts. I think some people, sure, that's a perspective. With me, I've always felt like I'm an open book. And I think we need more open books today. I think people just are closed. We don't know our neighbors. We don't say hi to people anymore, it seems, as much as we used to. Our communities seem to have grown apart in some way. And I think we need to share ourselves more. We need to understand that we have so much more in common than apart. And I think we need that today more than ever.
Oh, I completely agree with that. I've often marveled about the so-called connectivity that we're all supposed to have with all this technology, but I think it's been a big contributor to us growing further apart from one another. But I hope that this platform, this podcast, can help bring about what you want, which is more connectivity. And it's definitely something that I want. One of the things that I like about podcasts is that insider term, it's called long form communication. There's depth to it. There's conversation. It's not a 140 character social media post or tweet or whatever the heck it is that they're calling, or a 60-second video or whatever like that. We've been talking for over half an hour now, and our listeners are getting to know us, what's important to us. And so I completely agree with you. So I'm hoping that we can use the technology to actually foster what it is that you hope to accomplish with your audiobook. To that end, if I may use this as a segue, I would like our listeners to tell us, what other stories do you want Patrick to read for us? Is that good?
No, it's great. What was really wonderful is that I talk about Bill, the bartender, in the story, and that his name was Bill DeCoste. And Lori DeCoste, his daughter, read my story and contacted me. And Bill's no longer with us. And it meant so much to me. And it meant so much to her to hear this story. So I wanted to send out a hello to Lori and again say what a wonderful dad that you had. He's somebody that I will always remember, and somebody that so many people that were there will remember too. So I just wanted to thank Lori.
That's really nice. I'm sure she'll appreciate that. Is she the one who reached out and I passed along her email address to you?
No, that was someone I actually graduated with in high school.
Oh, okay.
But
Somebody else.
but that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's great. Hey, contact is contact.
That's right. Absolutely.
I love it. I love it when this stuff starts to, you never know. Boy, we could start a whole new episode on this. You never know the impact you're going to have on someone's life. You just don't. And I've had experiences where somebody I've worked with for a number of years, they left where I worked and they left me a note. And I got this nice note. This happened a couple of times, but I got this note from these people, and they're along the lines of like, I want to thank you for all you helped me with. And that, I mean, it was just amazing. You sit there and you go, I would have no idea I had this kind of impact on you. So be kind, because everybody's fighting a battle you know nothing about. Life is tough enough. Let's be nice to each other and make it a little better, right?
And what you say is so true. And what I tell people is my stories are actually thank yous. They're thank yous to the people and the events that impacted my life. So what you say is 100% true, and it resonates deeply with me. It's what stories connected to my readers, and why did they connect to you? Feel free to send me an email. You can go into my link on my book, and it has my email address. I love to hear from people. I love to connect to people. That's what it's all about. Tell me about your memories. I'd rather hear your memories than you sometimes listen to mine. And let's connect again. Like you said, let's just all try to connect again.
I couldn't agree more. The other thing I'll offer is an option too for people who reach out and tell us what stories they want to hear. If you go to the allaboutquinzeepodcast.com, allaboutquinzeepodcast.com, go to this episode. There's a contact form at that website, and you say, hey, this is the story we want to hear. Patrick and I will collect them, and we'll say, okay, this one is the next one that everybody really wants to hear, so we'll do that. And we hope to do a series of these, and we want you to participate as a listener. Connect with us, right?
Absolutely. Love to hear from you.
Patrick, I want to thank you again. I know you and I have other things we have to get to today, but I want to thank you for your time and sharing that story. We will be back in touch again soon.
That sounds great, John. Thank you so much.
Well, that's it for this episode of the All About Quincy podcast. The copyright for this audio program is by AR Enterprises Company, Inc., doing business as John Melley, voiceovers and production. The copyright for the story content, The Jar in the Bar from Growing Up Quincy, is copyright Patrick Grimes 2024. I want to thank Patrick Grimes for taking the time to perform that story for us. Like I said, we hope this is the first of many episodes where he's going to showcase a different story and read the story to us. If you are interested in picking up a copy of his book, Growing Up Quincy, you can find it on Amazon.com. Again, his last name is spelled Grimes, Patrick Grimes. Go to the show notes page and find a link to it on Amazon there at allaboutquincypodcast.com, or you can go directly to Amazon.com and pick up a copy of it there. If you already have a copy of the book, take a moment and tell us what story you'd love Patrick to read for us next. You can go to the All About Quincy podcast page at allaboutquincypodcast.com. Fill out the contact form, give us your name, your email, and the title of the story that you want Patrick to perform next. Until next time, thanks for listening.